Welcome to Coffee4Roelof, where I discuss all the interesting challenges that I experience in the real world of software innovation and corporate entrepreneurship. From leadership to agile transformation, I discuss my experience and I answer questions. Hi everyone and welcome to Coffee with Roelof. Hi everyone and welcome to Coffee with Roelof. To Coffee with Roelof. To Coffee with Roelof. Today we discuss assessments. Now it's a very interesting topic if you start looking at what assessments are used for. Assessments is a very important part of Entinology, where we utilize a maturity assessment with the 4-5 framework. The reason this discussion is really triggered right now is I'm currently consulting an organization that's utilizing methodology assessment. Now, it's clear that you need to understand the difference between methodology assessment, maturity assessment, and then experience assessment. And that's the three ones I want to talk about. The interesting thing about assessment is you need a framework against which you can measure assessments. The problem with methodology assessment is you can't really utilize it in a large organization to measure anything against it. It would rather be used to assess your knowledge on a specific methodology when either you are getting taught that methodology or you've already done the methodology course and you want to assess your knowledge. It's very important to note the difference. Knowledge, it's a theoretical assessment. Maturity assessment is something totally different. Maturity assessment can be assessed against a framework that you would stipulate certain goals or objectives that you want to achieve with your team or your staff in general. It's very useful when you want to change culture. It's very useful if you want to engage in your staff's improvement, in constant improvement and constant learning to better themselves. Then there is experience assessment. And experience assessment is often used during interviews by software companies where you give a person a specific task. It might be software development in Java or something like that, where they need to utilize their knowledge practically. Experience assessments is quite useful because someone that comes in for an interview can be very quickly assessed in terms of how good they are. I know with my first interview in IT, I went for a Visual Basic interview, and Visual Basic back then was like just in the starting days of your visual type of software programming development UIs. And my assessment was very difficult because for me, I just started learning Visual Basic like 2 or 3 months. To go and write a software package as part of an interview was quite complicated. It was an interesting assessment though because they did evaluate me very high. The point is, there's a difference in assessments, but there's also a difference in the outcome you want to achieve from those assessments. But let's discuss the methodology assessment first because it's quite important that you understand why someone might be applying a methodology assessment. And those assessments are quite advanced these days. There might be the use of AI in certain cases to make it a bit more difficult or challenging for the person that's being assessed. So if they answer certain questions quite accurately, the questions might become tougher to assess just how good they are with that methodology. The problem with it is if you are an expert in several methodologies and you are experienced in several methodologies, that assessment might not be the outcome that you expect. For example, you have someone that is experienced in multiple methodologies. Let's use project management methodology, for example. You might have an assessment that's aligned to PMBOK. PMBOK is, as we all know, a massive book of knowledge. It's got so much information in it that's quite useful. It doesn't mean I agree with all the methods or techniques that's in that book, because in my experience, applying that knowledge to certain projects might be different from other projects. So the more experienced you are, the more difficult it becomes to answer questions aligned to methodology. Maturity assessments is a little bit different because it can consolidate views, consolidating multiple methodologies. So I might have high maturity in project execution. I've got agile knowledge as well, and I've got your waterfall type, SDLC type methodologies knowledge as well, Prince 2, PMBOK, whatever. The point I'm making is, if you're assessing me on a methodology like PMBOK and expect me to have an high assessment, it's a problem. If I give answers, it will probably be in line with what I've experienced thus far in my life with all the methodologies that I know. It will not be method specific. If you expect me now to switch and to just focus on that specific method, I'm probably going to miss a few answers. Besides, no methodology is perfect. Every methodology has its own way, own place, and where you apply it. Maturity assessments are much better if you really want to understand how experienced an individual is and how good they are with a specific practice. They're also useful if you want to change culture in an organization. Culture change is normally where you want to apply different methodologies. It can be something in line with EQ, for example. You want your people to have some training or introduction into EQ, understand each other and respect one another. You might have some people that want to utilize WSJF as a prioritization technique and understand what WSJF is used for, because WSJF is used for probably 5% at the very least of projects out there for prioritization. But there's other methods as well in prioritization, which makes WSJF just one of plenty. So you want to broaden your staff or your team's knowledge as much as possible. And the only way to identify where the learning is needed is to have a maturity assessment that's aligned to multiple methodology questions, so that you can assess where there might be a need for training. And it's quite useful. And I know with my teams we used to put posters against the wall and brag around our maturity out of 5. We'll, for example, put a point there for 2.5 out of 5 or 3 out of 5. Now maturity advances. It's kind of a way to brag around just how much you advancing in your team with multiple methodology skills. Experience assessment is something different. Experience assessments can also be, how did you experience something? So you can assess, for example, how did you experience the last sprint or the last iteration or the last QBR or PI. It doesn't matter what you want to assess, but it's how you experienced it. For that, you also need a specific framework of measure. So with that in hand, I want to just point out that methodology assessments is normally not a good idea in an organization where you want to assess your staff to understand just where they are in terms of their strengths. Maturity assessments would rather be the right way to go, where you have multiple methodology assessments being done on your staff to understand where they might need some training. Want to ask me a question or buy me a coffee? Visit Coffee4Roelof.com. Also follow me on LinkedIn or on X at the handle Roelof. And don't forget to subscribe and follow me. Keep growing, my friends. See you tomorrow.